this is my first time doing this in front of a group, actually. And kind of timely, I get quotes in my email box every day, and I got this one a couple days ago. Move out of your comfort zone. You can only grow if you are willing to feel awkward and uncomfortable and you try something new. And that's basically what I'm feeling now. So, but I guess we're never too old to try something new. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to share my family's story surrounding our mother's adverse health care event. My husband and I were on vacation when we received a phone call from my family saying my mother had suffered a stroke. Of course, I wanted to book a flight home as soon as I could, but they were insistent we needn't do that because she would most likely be home by our scheduled return. She'd been admitted into the ER the night before, exhibiting classic stroke symptoms, facial droop, slurred speech, and even a deepened voice. She was assessed, given a CT scan, and admitted into the orthopedic unit. My family inquired as to why orthopedic instead of neurology. The nurse said neurology was full and assured them they were perfectly of taking care of her there. The attending doctor said that she would recover nicely and they were probably going to be starting her on heparin the next day. In spite of her symptoms, she was coherent and able to converse, saying she didn't like the sound of her deeper voice. My dad's breakfast of choice, and one he ate just about every day of his life, was oatmeal, especially with raisins. Knowing how hopelessly and inept this very intelligent and capable man was in the kitchen, she gave him step-by-step instructions as how to make it in the microwave. The family felt encouraged and reassured enough about her prognosis and care to go home for the night. In fact, so comfortable, they had made the decision to wait until the next day to contact us. When they returned to the hospital the next day, a nurse came into her room to set up the heparin IV, armed with her protocol instructions. She began pushing buttons over and over and over again, with the monitor reading error each time. She finally finishes, and my sisters commented that it seemed as though it was quite a complicated procedure, to which she responded with a yes and told them that was the reason they had another nurse cross-check, but they never saw that happen. Shortly after the procedure was begun, an attendant came to take her for another CT. The nurse first told them the heparin needed to keep running during the scan and then changed her mind, saying it would probably be okay to disconnect her from it, but it needed to be hooked up as soon as she returned. She was brought back, and a half hour went by with anyone reconnecting it. My sister sought out a nurse who was appalled that she hadn't been told about her return. Unfortunately, the next day, we received another call from home saying they weren't sure what was happening, but the family was disturbed when they arrived and found her condition had worsened. And they verbalized their observation to the nurse, who agreed with them. Their sense was that staff did not appear to be attentive or observant and were concerned about what would happen if they weren't present. Mom said she had fallen out of bed during the night, trying to use the bathroom. She was crawling on the floor, trying to find the railing to pull herself up. A nurse finally came in and scolded her for getting up, and at that point put an alarm on her. When my sister asked about what was happening with Mom, she said, "I don't know. I'm not familiar with stroke patients. That's why we have specialized units. I'm not comfortable with it." Mom starts involuntary movement on the right side of her body and says she feels sick. My sister pushed the nurse call button numerous times, but with no response. Finally, a nurse did appear, and then a doctor followed, came in and said, "There is bleeding on her brain from the heparin, and we're sorry this has happened." My dad, in disbelief, looked at him and said, "Are you saying the heparin caused this?" The doctor replied, "Yes, we caused this, and I'm sorry." We were able to book a plane getting us home the next day. Upon arriving at the hospital the next day, I was not prepared for what I saw. Her room was filled with family, and she was lying there hooked up to machines, breathing, but that was all. The mother I knew and loved wasn't there anymore. The doctor tells us the investigation found an error had indeed been made. The heparin was we were told the heparin was supposed to be started at a certain rate and run initially for 30 minutes, then decreased for the remainder of the time. But it was never reduced. It was run at the initial rate the entire time. We were called into a family meeting that same day to discuss and decide about her care. To our disbelief, her primary care doctor wasn't even aware that it was an error that put her in this horrific condition. He was visibly shaken and appeared to be in disbelief, covering his face with his hands and saying how he loved this hospital. We were told there was no chance she would recover, and we had to decide if we wanted her to go to a long-term care facility or give her comfort care only. We all knew what she would have wanted, so we opted for comfort care. For 7 agonizing days, we kept vigil at her bedside and did whatever we could to wrap her in love. Her room was filled with the evidence of how devoted she was to family and how devoted they were to her. Get well cards and drawings made by adoring grandchildren and great-grandchildren, photos in very recent times of her enjoying times with them swinging, riding on a pony, sitting side by side on a swing at the lake with my dad. There was a magnet that said, "Slap on a little lipstick, you'll be fine," which we could relate to because this was a woman who didn't step out the door of her house without her makeup on. She had many times told my sisters and I, if I ever become incapable of taking care of myself, please make sure I have makeup on. Seeing her lying there without makeup, she was beautiful to us. But, oh, how I wanted to slap on a little lipstick and make it all fine. One of my daughters, in an effort to try to comfort me, gave me an angel that said, and an inscription was, it was her thinking of others that reminded you of her. The day of the evening she had the stroke, she had been doing just that. She had been going to my sister's 3 times a week to help care for twin infant great-granddaughters and their 3-year-old sister. My dad would drive her there and pick her up later in the day. Watching my dad in those last days struggling with trying to come to terms with the reality of losing her and to complicate matters, the events leading up to the condition she was in was almost too much for us to bear. He even had moments of regretting his decision to call 911. My parents' story of enduring love and devotion to each other through their almost 63 years of marriage was the stuff fairy tales were made of. My father was devastated and never really recovered from this huge loss. We did our best to help him, but he lived in a state of depression until he died almost 9 years later, always questioning why he was still here and wishing he wasn't. If it is possible to die from a broken heart, this man did. 13 years have passed since we lost her, but as I was preparing my story, I was surprised by how difficult it was emotionally to relive it. I can forgive, but I can never forget the tragic way she died. I feel that by telling it, I can hopefully find closure. I heard a quote from Fred Rogers recently. When parents are at a loss as to what to say to their children when they see and hear bad things happening, he said his mother always told him to look for the helpers. We had helpers when we were going through this journey. The facility was transparent with us by owning up to the error. The staff cared for her with compassion and understanding and treated us in the same way. We did find out because of this error, changes were made in an attempt to help make sure it wouldn't happen to others in the future. Being accepted as a consumer to MAPS, I found helpers who have made and continue to work to improve the safety of patients in all areas of healthcare in Minnesota. It is my hope that telling my story, others could be encouraged and inspired to become helpers by getting involved in partnering with organizations and communities to make healthcare safer for everyone everywhere. We've come a long way, but still have a long way to go.